Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that it's not too cold where you are. How about yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, it's very, very chilly here out in my little office shed, but staying warm. Thanks, Rebecca.
Good to hear it. Yeah, definitely very icy, but very, very seasonal, I suppose. So I thought
Yeah,
it would be good if we start by introducing ourselves. I know that we know a lot of people who are on this webinar today. Thanks so much for joining us. But I know there's some people who maybe only know one of us or we're yet to meet. So I guess so my background, I'll start. I have worked in technology sector recruitment for like nearly 18, 19 years now. Most of that has either been in executive search or in-house or on like outsourced recruitment projects when companies need to grow quickly. Um, but most recently, yes, working exclusively in executive search, which is really exciting. And it's given me some great perspectives on leadership within technology companies just now. Andrew?
yeah, awesome. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Great to be chatting today. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm Andrew. I am the founder of JackHR. So my background has been in the sort of the scaling tech space for about 10, 11 years now. Mostly focusing around like people projects, learning and development, leadership development, in sort of in tech companies, mostly all up in Edinburgh in Scotland. And yeah, some of the sort of work I've been doing with those companies really led me to found Jack HR, because I was seeing some similar challenges, some similar opportunities, and yeah, really just wanted to be able to help as many um, scaling teams as possible, really. So excited to get into some of that stuff today.
And Andrew and I briefly worked together at one point.
We
So
did.
when you were
Yeah.
setting up on your own, you got in touch with me. And one of the things that came up was how increased turnover just seems to be a problem across the tech sector and just in general. So, I'm frequently speaking to companies who are concerned because they have staff turnover of above 20%. And if you look at the stats, it could be anywhere between think the lowest was like 10.2%, like to 15% for the tech sector, exclusively on average, depending on who you're asking on what day. But it's been a growing issue that for technology companies, and one which is getting increasingly expensive for businesses to manage. Um, there's lots of stuff out there around the cost of hire, but I recently built a calculator which I'm happy to share with anybody. They want to drop me a message after, that's no problem. And we went through this example together, and somebody who is earning 70,000, we'll say, um, a good salary these days, if they've worked with you for 6 months and then there's a 3 month notice period, if they were to leave within that first year, you're looking at recruitment costs of over £14,000 because you have to factor in the time that's been spent interviewing. You're looking at maybe £35,000 of salary. There's the benefits associated with that, which could easily be over another 10,000. Then you've got training and onboarding costs. You may even have severance costs, there's management time, lost productivity. Then there's the lost productivity of the other people around them, and then the cost of anyone who leaves potentially because of a bad hire. And when I looked into all of that, the cost of someone on like £70,000, in the figures might change depending on what benefits package or what your severance policy is, but it was coming in around about 130,000 there without factoring in whether or not they worked in a sales function. And certainly, I do a lot of help building sales teams as well. And it can be a sizable percentage of someone's annual target that you have to write off on top of the salary cost there. And the kinds of companies that we're working with, that can easily get into hundreds of thousands of pounds really quickly, because when you start to consider that opportunity cost. So yeah, the true cost of turnover can be pretty expensive for any business that's going through that problem. So we thought it'd be really valuable to get together and find out a little bit more about what is happening within the sector there. So I've talked a bit about the financial cost. Andrew, tell me a little bit about the indirect costs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's staggering some of these figures. I think we must have been reading some of the same articles as we were researching this, Rebecca, because yeah, some of those costs anywhere from in sort of broader terms like half someone's salary up to two times someone's salary to replace them. And I think yeah, we can get almost a little bit blinkered sometimes by some of those harder costs like the agency fees, the recruitment, the training. But when you start to dig a little bit deeper, I think that the problem really does really start to reveal itself. So I think you mentioned a little bit about productivity there, which is a really interesting one. You've got that sort of that ramp up time, getting people up to speed, even with like the best onboarding programs, that could be like 3 to 6 months. But I think what we maybe don't always factor in is, well, maybe a job advert's been live for a few months, and maybe it's a 3 month notice period. That's so much time where work still needs to be done. Productivity
Yeah.
yeah, it's been eroded over that time there, which is yeah, a really interesting one.
And to hire quickly is quite often expensive. Like it's always possible. So you might also have the cost of an interim thrown in there if you
Mm.
have got if you can't wait.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I think one thing that you can see with this sort of lost productivity is the sort of the impact that has on the people left behind. So people picking up the work that's maybe being left over. I think that can have a huge impact on morale. People start to feel a little bit resentful almost of the team that's around them. Burnout can start to rise. You've got presenteeism that comes in with that. People maybe start to then question, why should I stick around and be the one who's doing all this and picking up all this extra work? So they maybe start thinking about leaving. Um, I think in scale up and startup businesses, particularly, there's maybe a core group of people who have been involved in building the product or building the business, and that could be crazy amounts of institutional knowledge that walks out the door, which is so hard to replace. I think yeah, these sort of more hidden costs really do start to run deep when you look into them.
Definitely. And within sales or any kind of like partnerships or customer
Mm,
success roles, you're also looking at the loss of those external relationships and maybe even like there's value to informal industry relationships that people may have cultivated that,
mm,
there's always going to be a ramp up period there too. So
mm,
yeah, definitely lots of stuff for us to be concerned about. And that really, we've all
yeah.
worked in a company where there's been a lot of turnover or change at some point, quite likely, and picked up the slack. It's definitely something that we want to avoid. Um, so we, I guess, could cover off some of the things that we're seeing happen in the market just now.
Yeah. What is it that you hear in sort of the market in terms of why people are looking to leave? I think yeah, it'd be interesting
So
to hear a
there's
little bit about that.
so there's a couple of different strands. There's definitely one group of people who either whose work style has changed or their preference for work style has changed. There are actually people who do really want to go back into the office and they've been working for a company hundreds of miles away and they don't want to continue on that path. So waiting for the right opportunity can take a while for them. But equally, you have people who are having to go back to the office and maybe they've relocated. So that just doesn't make sense for them. There are people who are looking to leave a couple of companies. I would say there's definitely, I don't know if it's like a symptom of the pandemic or all the change or, the turbulence is happening. But I do think that in places like employee relations have soured, like a lot of people who are leaving, I think they're not necessarily getting on with their colleagues anymore, or they didn't know them and now they've got to know them. And, there's issues with team dynamics there. But ultimately, a lot of the time it is coming down to managers. And in good companies, it's still really hard to tempt people away, and there has to be an exciting proposition or something that really matters to that candidate to get them to join your organization. So just because there is an increase in turnover and people are looking, it doesn't necessarily mean it's any easier to recruit. If anything, there was a lot of people who changed roles during the pandemic and maybe had like a false start of 3 months or 6 months somewhere, and it's made them quite cautious about what they will do moving forwards. But definitely lack of career development, not knowing
Mm,
how to move forward, um,
mhm,
and a change of work style. Money's an issue. People are a bit more realistic about what can happen with
mm.
salaries just now. But yeah, stress, burnout, mostly boss related, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can get onto some of that in a bit.
Definitely. So, Andrew, you've also got your own take, and we had a fascinating conversation about the generational differences in the workplace. It'd be great if you could share that with everyone.
Yeah, I think maybe this could be a webinar in itself in the future, but I think for the sake of time, I'll maybe just focus on a little bit of reading I was doing around Gen Z. So I think, from what I've read, it's sort of the Gen Z is taking up about 20% of the sort of the workforce at the moment, but by 2030 that'll be over half. So a really, it's really important, I think, that we get to understand this generation coming through the workplace, and and I think it's a really interesting group of people. And I was watching a great talk by Simon Sinek, and he was talking about how Gen Z and some younger millennials as well, actually, in general, this isn't everyone, but in general, are more conflict avoidant than other generations. So, if they feel like they want a raise, for example, if they feel like they want to give some difficult feedback, instead of having that difficult conversation, they'll just leave. And like I say, this is a generalization, but
Yeah,
you could all of a sudden have a sort of a notice hit your email, and it'll feel really out of the blue. But it's because the sort of in general slightly more conflict avoidant than other generations have been. So I think it's something we need to be really conscious about and support support them in having those conversations and being able to have those conversations, whether that's through training or coaching or whatever works. But I think also for managers as well, just to be super aware that we need to create a space where people feel able to share these things and share them in like a non-judgmental way.
definitely. And psychological safety is really hard to
Mm,
foster in your environment. I guess what you said at first, I was a little bit surprised of. Then I thought a bit about it and the experiences that I've had working with Gen Z, and they've all been really positive so far. But one thing that I just see about their generation compared to people like me, who, I'm in my early 40s, is it grew up without social media as a teenager, and very, very grateful for it as much as I love it. The they've grown up in a world where you share your likes all the time and your positives. There's
mm,
probably a very small percentage of Gen Z that are ever negative online. They've brought up in a with that social dynamic around them, and I can see how that would translate into the workforce and make people feel just a little bit more. Um, but it's just unusual to maybe tell
mm.
someone something they don't want to hear.
Yeah, that's it. And I think it is just it is a case of supporting people to have these types of conversations, or being able to feel comfortable sharing when they have something to share. It is an interesting one. But I think it's clear with a few generations coming into the workforce that it's much more than just a job. So it's about the development, it's about the opportunities. But I think particularly sustainability came up as a big one as well.
Yeah,
So how are businesses being more proactive in the community? How are they being more proactive around the planet? And I think that's something that again, we need to be super aware of. So um, I'd be interested to understand, Rebecca, though, around if you see a similar sort of difference between role types or people going for different roles, if there's a contrast in terms of what people are looking for and how they operate in the workplace.
I think one thing that I'm seeing in general for anyone who's looking to change roles just now is just um, there's a lot more maturity around how people assess the robustness of the commercial side of a business that they're thinking of joining. And
Mm,
they will ask more detailed questions than they previously would have around, share allocation, rather than just wanting to know who the investors are potentially. They also, like sales, revenue, commercial in particular, in the startup world, are asking a lot more questions around kind of like resources and support they will have in building their pipeline.
Mm,
One of the things that is really easy to do is to hire someone and think they're going to solve all of those problems, especially in sales, when the reality is that person can't execute without certain tools nowadays in the modern world.
mm. No, I
Um,
totally.
and on that sustainability note, I think the energy saving light has just kicked in my office. So I
Is
will
that what happened?
sort,
Yeah, I noticed that.
sort
Yeah,
that out in a
need
second.
to jump up and down for a
Mhm.
second.
Technically, people are still looking for that creative challenge and
Mm,
making sure they're not looking for any legacy tech, but definitely questions around career development when I'm looking at projects which encompass early years. But at the senior end of the market, people are looking a lot more at the opportunity to have some skin in the game, how that's really going to work, and what they uh, will they have access to external mentors is something I'm hearing
mm,
more people ask for. But
yeah.
yeah, definitely, lots of things to consider there if you are having to backfill those roles. But I wanted to, one of the things that I have been speaking to people about quite a bit at the moment is around how you can build retention into hiring. Because obviously,
Mm,
there's been quite a few costly mistakes that some businesses are making, not all of them. And um, when we were having a conversation about this, we were like, oh, retention doesn't really, that's not really for talent acquisition and recruitment to deal with. But
yeah.
I think there were a few things that we discussed at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a great conversation around like structured hiring and how, and I think you were speaking really, yeah. So you, yeah, mentioned some really interesting points around what processes are in place to make sure that we're making those great hires, which, ultimately will help us to keep hold of those people. It'd be cool to hear a little bit more about that.
So, like many businesses are now using structured hiring, building out their scorecards, and thinking, about who they're going to bring in much more carefully, as certainly as a result of like salaries going up so much and there being a lack of less investment into the tech sector. People have been a lot more thoughtful around their hiring decisions where they may have been a little bit more instinctive. But one of the things that um, I have been working with people on is like how you build retention in at that phase. And it's really easy for your scorecards can just cover things like the essential experience someone must have, skills and the attributes, and then a couple of hygiene questions like where does this person live? Are they happy with the money? Those kind of things that you might just want to tick off as a sanity check. But actually,
Mm,
having a section dedicated to retention into your recruitment scorecard can make a big impact.
mm,
So, some of the things that you might put in there that are really easy to forget when you are in a rush to bring people into your company are like ensuring it, sanity checks around, is this person a fit in terms of their career aspirations? Can we help them develop effectively? Um, are we able to provide the resources that they're looking for to continue their career? Because those are things that you might ask, quite well. Some of those things, anyway, would be things you would ask a year later, maybe in an annual review,
mm,
hopefully before that. But you would be thinking a lot more about career development at that stage. But when that is becoming so much more important to Gen Z in particular, I think baking that in from the outset and thinking a little bit more about will they be happy in this role is going to be absolutely vital because you're setting yourself up for failure if you hire the best possible person and think, yeah, this person's, I don't know, like technically amazing, or they've got the best sales figures I've ever seen, or they've transformed companies in these ways.
mm,
But if you can't actually, if they're not going to be happy and achieve those goals that they have started working towards already, potentially they're just going to leave you. And I think you would be better off um, not hiring, essentially, and making sure that you can have some stability in the team, especially for senior roles or anything client facing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you can see why people get into that mindset of we should just hire the best person, but it's the best person for that role, not
Yeah,
just the best person. It's just, yeah. Where does values alignment and that whole idea come into that? Is it a big piece of this or?
yeah, definitely. I think you certainly want to have that, and nearly everyone has got, culture,
Mm,
attitude, fit, or
mm,
what can this person bring to the culture within their scorecard. But um, values are becoming much more important to people, and if they don't align, people will just leave pretty abruptly. Like that is, I think, is much less tolerated than it used to be.
mm, yeah. And so is this scorecard something you take clients through kind of step by step, or how does that piece work?
Yeah, definitely. Take people, like, tailor it to their situation as well.
Mm,
Um, and address any kind of underlying problems within their business that they've shared. But I think that it only works if you're going to assess against it. So
mm,
there's a couple of key questions that I would lean into and listen really closely to, people's answers in an interview, and they're really obvious ones, but they are ones which people forget to ask, especially when they're under pressure to get somebody in. And
mm,
those are, like, the first one, really obvious. Like, out of all the jobs you've had, what ones were your most favorite and why? And
mm,
then asking the opposite, out of all the jobs you've had, which ones were the least favorite and why? And just making sure that you can, um, replicate what's needed, and that you are not actually, mimicking an environment where someone has not enjoyed work or not been
mm,
successful in the past. It takes different things for people to realize their talents, in different organizations. But then asking people, like, tell me about your career goals.
mm.
And then importantly, I like to always ask people what steps towards those they've taken. I think that's a really telling one, because it's very easy for people to come up with the first answer, and a little bit
Yep.
harder for the second one. But then I think having a conversation at that point to check, what do you need an employer to do? Because, um, especially across generations, some people are looking for more support in the workplace around their development, whereas, like, I don't know, people in their 40s, quite often they'd just rather be left to go and sort it out themselves. So I think that, acknowledging that, and then checking, is that something that I can provide early on, is
Mm,
absolutely vital. And, recently there was a search I did for a CTO. It felt like we had a rock star who was walking away by not, when they declined the role. But
mhm,
actually, I was quite happy for them and everyone, because it wasn't the right career match. And that is something which you need to have in order for someone to stay within your business. And then, very quickly, found another person who actually was, just, the other candidate set the bar for
mhm.
technical aptitude and other skills, but actually just a much better alignment around the direction of the business. So it is worth
Yeah.
persevering with.
Yeah, totally. Feels just it's got to be a fit for everyone, and I can see how um, how you could take those questions and almost use them while someone's in the business as well. If whether that's a manager asking career career sort of aspiration, those types of questions. We can get onto that in a bit, but just yeah, I think there's so much symmetry there between hiring and then um, sort of once they're in the business as well.
I think they are both, like, reviews and interviews. They are both different forms of assessment where everyone should,
Mm,
both sides are going into an interview and thinking, is this right for me? Um, but people should be, constantly assessing that alignment, and feel much more open to see that, this is great for me now, but
yeah,
we should be in a position where we can have a lot more. I'm going to need a bit more, or I'll have to look.
yeah.
People shouldn't be afraid of saying that, because actually, That's
Mm.
great for a manager to hear early so they can plan.
Yeah, 100%. The more information, the better. Yeah. And
And
yeah, what else are you doing to sort of enhance that overall candidate experience? And sounds like you've got such a great sort of step-by-step process. Is there anything else that's in there?
I won't bore everyone with the minutiae of that, but definitely, I think that we have to remember that people who have got options right now when you're hiring,
Mm,
there's they're going to continue to have options in 6 to
mm,
12 months if it's not worked out. So definitely making sure that there's a really good process will, like, around recruitment and then on to onboarding, I do think will make a difference. Certainly people who leave quite quickly, some of the things they tell me is, I just got no information about the company. I wasn't sure what I was meant to be doing, and it could be that they just weren't told that they weren't doing the right things, even
mm,
because they didn't know sometimes. But onboarding's absolutely vital, and I think as well, like, thinking about how you position an offer to someone can also help with retention around salary reviews, managing people's expectations from the outset there, and tailoring things where possible, especially if you are in an early stage business. That's something that you
mm.
have to your advantage. So you can set yourself up for stronger retention if you put a little bit more um, in at the first stages.
100%. Yeah, that effort definitely pays off.
And Andrew, I'm really interested to hear a bit from yourself now. Um,
Mm.
Tell me a little bit about the dynamic between people ops and managers and businesses and how that aids retention, because it is something that, it can be you know, an overlooked resource from time to times, and people don't realize how much support they can get within their own business.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's such a close connection between managers um, and engagement and retention, and but we've been talking seems like forever in terms of people don't leave businesses, they leave managers. I think it was like the early 90s that sort of term first sort of came about, and I think we'll probably be talking about it in another 90 years as well. But I think the way that I have been thinking about it, or at least the way that I've been talking to other businesses about it, is I've been doing sort of quite a bit of research into Gallup and how they approach engagement, and they've kind of developed these 12 employee needs for engagement. So 12 things, 12 factors that employees need to feel engaged at an organization. And
What are
line
they?
managers, oh, I can share the report, but
I'm
it's
sure
it's things
after.
like career development, feeling part of a team, feeling cared for, all these types of things. And I think the shocking thing or the interesting thing is that managers are directly responsible for 70% of those drivers. So like the overwhelming majority of an employee's engagement leads back to a manager. Um, but then there's like this other side of the coin where there's stats out there saying 82% of managers aren't equipped to be a manager. They haven't had the training to help them be a great manager. And a super scary stat that I came across was that there are approximately, or estimated to be, 2.4 million untrained managers in the UK workforce,
And
which, and
that
it,
really
yeah,
doesn't surprise anyone because, like, I certainly didn't
yeah,
get any management or leadership training until well after. And I do look
exactly.
back now and I think, oh, if only I'd known that, or, I would have dealt with
Yeah,
that situation differently. And I would like to think that over time, my skills have improved.
I'm sure
But
they
through
I'm sure they
training.
have, but I think it's a proactive thing, or it should be a proactive thing. I think so many businesses wait until it's a fire, and then all of a sudden they need an intervention, they need some support. But I think particularly for like the scaling businesses, with such rapid growth, people will just, if they're good at their job, they'll inherit a team. They'll inherit people, or if someone has founded a business and it grows, and all of a sudden they become a CEO, like they're two very very different roles, and require two very very different skill sets. And there's and there's a term going around at the moment. It's not a particularly nice term, but we call these people accidental managers, and like they've just inherited a group of people, but don't necessarily have the skill. And when you're in such an influential position like that, it can be so costly if you get it wrong. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
And really daunting for the individual if they're
Mm,
put in that situation. I think that it can be, yeah, a bit overwhelming for some people. So, Andrew, tell
100%.
me, what are the most important skills that you think managers need to develop early on?
Yeah, I think I like to think about this in terms of conversations. So yes, there's skills that underpin these conversations, but I think everything that a manager does leads back to having brilliant conversations. There's four types of conversations that I think about or talk about, and I've easily put them into four C's. I like a little bit of alliteration. So we've got the four C's of great conversations. The first one is coaching conversations. So I think the role of a manager is rapidly turning into that of a coach. So, um, we need to help managers build these coaching skills, whether that's asking great questions or building a space for employees to think, or even just recognizing that they don't need to have all the answers or know all the stuff. That's okay. It's just about having a sort of a coaching conversation around that and helping their team to think. Um, Career conversations is the second one. So career development, I think no shock that it's the number one driver of engagement in organizations at the moment. So how are managers equipped to have these conversations about growth and aspirations? Courageous conversations is probably the one that comes into people's minds in terms of like the one that builds the most anxiety in managers. I think there's a lot of difficult conversations that managers have to have. They, could be managing up, it could be constructive feedback, performance management. They all need courage in some way, shape, or form, but managers probably don't feel supported or know how to tackle them. And then the last one is caring conversations. So our managers are so well placed to be able to spot those like really early warning signs of mental ill health, of poor physical health, of burnout. But do they feel confident to ask questions about that, to have a conversation around it, to really show that empathy and care? So that's a sort of another really powerful conversation for people to have. So I think if we can support managers to have those types of conversations, and obviously underpinned by some great skills, some great questions, some great frameworks, I think we're going a long way to really help our managers, but also to help retention and engagement in the process.
I love those four C's there: coaching, career, courageous, and caring. And I
Mm,
think as well with caring, we have to remember that just because someone tells you something doesn't mean that you have to be the person to fix it. You can always
yeah,
signpost them elsewhere, and that might be the
100%.
most appropriate thing to do.
It's a great shout.
Um,
Yeah.
so, when people are in work in your company, how do you identify gaps in those skills? Because they all sound pretty critical. I mean,
Mm,
courageous is hard, caring's vital.
mm,
Career, you said, were that was the number one thing that people are
mm.
looking for. So, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think again it goes back to a conversation, and I think this time a conversation with your workforce. So, whether that's through engagement surveys, whether that's you know pulse surveys, whether it's just word of mouth or focus groups or whatever it is. I think it's having a two-way dialogue uh, with your with your team, with the people in your organization. It's Yeah, it could be people feeling there's no opportunity, people feeling unsupported. We could start to see presenteeism or people taking sick leave, and you can glean so much from like all these different avenues. But if you're not listening, or if you don't have that two-way dialogue, you're just going to be sort of stabbing in the dark almost. So I think that would be a first thing, would be to open up really
Mhm.
open and honest two-way dialogue. And then I think the other slightly different way of looking at it is by helping your managers with like one-to-one coaching. So in like these coaching conversations, it's amazing what new awareness comes up. So whether that's gaps in your knowledge, gaps in your skill set, whether that's just thinking, oh, actually, this thing that I'm thinking about now is what's been blocking me, and it's what's been stopping me having these conversations, and now I can start to work towards getting past that. So I think investing, it is a big investment, but I think investing
Yeah.
in coaches for your management team, I think again is going to be a great way to open up some of that insight into what might not be quite right.
And so you've highlighted there the value of almost like coaching the
Mm.
coaches within your organization. Um, can you give an example where like training management has really helped to boost retention, just so we can bring it back to that?
Yeah,
Because it's the most vital thing to invest in to improve your retention, I imagine.
100%. I remember a group of graduates that we hired into a business that I was working in, and I think we all sort of knew the sort of the stats and the potential for people. So there's a 12-month program that they were on, and we sort of knew some of them would probably leave at the end of that program. Some of them maybe would even leave during the program, and we'd sort of resided to the fact that um, that would happen just based on the stats that were out there. Um, but we also had a really engaged group of managers who were supporting these graduates through their time with us, and we made it a real focus to support our managers to be able to have really great career conversations with these graduates, so that they knew that there was a path for them after the 12 months. They knew there was going to be opportunity for them to grow in that organization. And yeah, it was amazing to see the managers growing in confidence in having these conversations. That was great to see. But the sort of the stats didn't lie. So there was 10 graduates. None of them left after the end of that 12 months, and 8 of them were promoted into more senior roles.
That's
And
great.
that all came from these managers having brilliant and consistent career conversations with them. So yeah, that's probably one of the best ones that I've come across.
So I'm conscious of time, so it'd be good, I guess, if we both touch on a little bit about some of the warning signs that we
Mm.
see in businesses. Um, what are the things that you have observed, like once people are in the door and you think, oh, that's maybe something we should be watching for retention issues in future?
Yeah, I think again, it's all of the output from these conversations that you're having with your if you're in a manager's shoes with your direct reports. I think um, the one-to-one meeting, I think, is probably one of the most important meetings that a manager can have, because there's so much that can come out of that, whether that's career aspirations, or maybe it's even the stuff that isn't being said. Maybe a really sort of high flyer or really sort of vocal member of the team is starting to withdraw, starting to not to share their opinion, not to share what their hopes and dreams are, and that can be a really interesting sign when that starts to happen. That sort of that sort of lack of engagement. Um, yeah, again, sort of when we sort of going all the way back to the start, when we're thinking about productivity, when we start to see some of the work quality or quantity start to drop off, I think that can be a really sort of early warning sign of maybe something's not quite right. Um, yeah, I don't know if there are things that come up in the conversations you have, Rebecca.
So I think that one of the biggest warning signs that well, there's two, but one of them is that people are actually telling you they have problems and then you're doing nothing about them. Like
Yeah.
that feels like something that candidates at all levels have always spoken to me about, and that it's like, well, there's a sense of frustration, and it's not, if they have had that conversation with you about a problem, I think there's nothing worse than doing nothing.
Mm,
Basically. And even if you can't do anything, I think, it's still doing something where you explain to someone, I can change that. Like, this is why, or, maybe we can tweak this to help things.
mm,
But I don't like, it does sound like people raise their issues and they are not always listened to. And that could be part of managers just not having the confidence to have some of those more courageous
Mm,
conversations. And then the other warning sign that is just like the lack of conversations that people might be having. It's not unusual for people to feel very disconnected from their teams, especially those people who are in that risk category of they're working remotely but actually want to go into an office hybrid or in
mm,
person. You have to be very close to them because for them it could be part of the social interaction at work that's missing. And
mhm.
people maybe sometimes withdraw in advance of leaving. I'm sure i'm sure there's lots of other warning signs, but the
Mm.
main things that people talk to me about are, I really wanted to make this work, or I tried, or, and every now and again, it's just, I can't go any further. I don't know what to do. So, and rarely people say I've had that conversation internally.
That's so interesting because yeah, I think we think about these warning signs as being something that's like hidden that we need to discover, but actually someone just saying, "I have this problem and I want to talk about a potential solution." It's so interesting.
And one of the other things that I will like do depending on um, the circumstances of a search is where possible, I will try and take an exit interview from
Mm,
someone who's leaving. And I find it like really amazing how few exit interviews actually take place. There's
yeah.
there's maybe like a survey, but I don't think that that ever really gets to the heart of any of the more challenging management issues that people have maybe confronted at work if they've had problems being a
Mm,
manager, or and that could impact your organizational design. And I don't think it also um, gives much actionable feedback that a manager would want to improve. If you're a manager and people in your team start leaving and you know that the turnover is high, it's going to give you the fear a little bit, and you'd rather know what's going on and have a chance to fix things, in my opinion.
totally. 100%. Yeah. I think definitely having the option at least to give it a go.
So I think one of the things that's come out of this is just we live in a work environment right now where so much is done via Slack and WhatsApp and emails, that
Mm,
we just need to be maybe a bit more personal in our approach in terms of the amount of face to face or virtual face to face communication that we have.
totally. And I think there's maybe a nervousness for some of us, and spoken a lot about conversations, and there's a nervousness that we get those conversations wrong, and that'll probably happen, but maybe just having a little bit of vulnerability to sort of say, I'm not sure exactly how to have this conversation, or I'm not sure exactly how this conversation is going to go, but I want to have a shot, and I want to see where we get to, and just open that bit of dialogue. So yeah, I think we can talk about the support that's needed, and we can talk about what we're maybe not doing, but also I think yeah, just giving it a go.
And I would also advocate, just as an afterthought, that exit interviews, where possible, are done by the TA person, or if you are
Mm,
working with a search partner, um, with someone who is involved in the replacement, so that that feedback can be built in, because you don't always know that there is a problem with a job. And
mm,
we've talked that about people leaving managers, but actually sometimes some jobs are just bad jobs. They're impossible, and th- you're never going to be able to achieve what you set out to do for various reasons. It could be to do with resources, or something completely outside of your control, and
mm,
that is not always picked up on.
mm. No, I think you're so right. I think I think what one thing we've definitely sort of figured out is it's a difficult journey. There's lots of moving parts, but yeah, hopefully some helpful thoughts in the last 45 minutes.
So we will follow up with some information. Certainly, I'm happy to share my um, best retention questions to ask
Mm,
interview, and how to go about developing your own retention scorecard, along with some top tips there. I know that you've also got some ideas of things that you'd be happy to help people with, and you're always open to having a conversation with people about management skills in particular. That's a real passion point for you.
Yeah, I think must have said conversations more than yeah, more than any other word today. But yeah, happy to have a chat. I'll yeah, I'll also yeah follow up and yeah, if there's anything I can help with, then always keen.
Great. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat just now. I know we've been really thorough, so there might not be anything just now. Um, but if there is anything you would like to know, then um, do flag that.
Yeah,
So I
I
think
don't see the chat, Rebecca. So maybe just if there are any, just
I have
shout them
had a
out.
look. I have
Okay,
a look. It doesn't look like there's anything there just now, but
okay,
um,
cool,
I said if you'd rather follow up one on one, get in touch with um, myself or Andrew at any point. That's no problem. You can reach out to us here on LinkedIn or on the emails below.
amazing. Thanks so much for setting this all up, Rebecca. It's been great to chat about, and thanks everyone for joining. And yeah,
No
been
problem. Well,
brilliant.
thanks so much. And let us know if there's anything we can help with, or if you have any top tips on retention that we've missed, that would also be great to know. Thanks. Goodbye.
Perfect. Cheers, everyone. Bye.